For centuries, the mystique of Alaska has called to us. Its wild, unforgiving lands, deliriously high mountain peaks, and miles of ice across expansive glaciers. But that landscape is increasingly unfamiliar. It's changing. In fact, some say it's already changed. In a little town in southwest Alaska, change has come to their shores. Newtok, a village of about 400 people, is being squeezed.
It's too dangerous to stay here. I am scared for my kids.
The Ninglick River on one side, the Bering Sea on the other.
I mean, there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress behind it all, trying to make sure that our people need not worry.
How many kids still are living with you over at the house?
7.
7?
7, I think. Wait. 6. 6.
Are you afraid for them?
Oh yeah, I am afraid for them.
The people of Newtok live a mainly subsistence lifestyle, getting their food from the land and ocean. But both the land and the ocean they rely on is changing how they must live. A little bit every day.
It changes every year.
As the bank of the Ninglick River continues to crumble. In just the past few years, town leaders say about 200 feet of land has been washed away. For Andrew John, that includes the physical memories of his godparents' home, which was demolished along with several others as the river quickly approached.
One of the foundations fell into the river. All of this ground that you see where there's no grass that was growing was literally under the home.
Watch where you're walking.
And whether you walk or drive around town, the effects of melting permafrost are hard to miss. Telephone poles supported by 2x4s to remain somewhat upright. A warped boardwalk that connects the village, and the quicksand-like tundra which seems to be swallowing it.
An aging infrastructure. A lot of the homes are hard to maintain strictly because of the thawing ground that we are on and the constant undulations, freeze and thaw, and it tweaks homes where some homes, their doors can't fully shut anymore. You know what I mean? And we're talking sub-zero temperatures in the dead of winter.
And this means the only thing to do is move to safer ground. One by one, piece by piece, pile by pile. Memories collected, wrapped, and packed.
It's been kind of hard for us because we lived in that house and there are lots of memories.
Ready for the next home.
We've never been there. We've never been to our new home, so we're kind of excited.
You haven't even seen it yet?
No, we're not. From that distance we did, but we never seen inside the house.
Mom!
We've been giving away stuff that we don't use anymore or we don't need. I'm trying not to bring all the junk.
This move is inevitable, some say.
I want them to be living in a safe place and not threatened by flooding.
I have lost a lot of sleep.
But that doesn't make going any easier.
I wish I could take them and put them back like a puzzle.
The journey isn't long if measured in distance, but the separation of 9 miles could divide a community.
Looking at my old village, I cried. Didn't want to leave my village. But then after I moved here, I was kind of sad. I'm still kind of sad about leaving my village where I was born, where I grew up. I love that village. It's still a beautiful village, but the underneath is not safe because the underneath the village is all permafrost. No sand, no rocks, just permafrost.
The decision to move was made more than 20 years ago. And for 2 decades, it's been a race against time, Mother Nature, and a changing climate.
I was told by an elder, she told me 2 years ago, hurry, hurry, you need to move somewhere else.
A race which some residents say started out as a marathon, but has now turned into a sprint. With 13 new homes built, about 1/3 of Newtox's residents will be settled in the new town site of McTarvik within the space of a few weeks.
Moving here, I feel safe. Better land, best walking place. I've been taking pictures every single day. I see everything new every day.
Even with the move, there is still a risk, not to life and property, but to connection. About 250 miles up the west coast of Alaska sits Shaktoolik, population 250. The current location of the Yupik village faces a similar danger as Newtok. The Bering Sea on one side, the Tahuminik River on the other.
As a community, decide to go ahead and try to stay and fight. You have the river there, and then you have the ocean, which are very rich in subsistence resources like fish and marine mammals, birds, things off the land like berries and surah and beans. To move would be moving away from those resources and making them more difficult to get at.
But that doesn't change the fact their land is disappearing. With sea ice forming later and later each year, there is no protection for the fragile soil. Fall storms batter the narrow strip of land.
There's people watching during the night.
Randy Tukuk has lived in Shaktoolik all his life.
The worst part of the storms always be like during the dead of the night, like around 3 o'clock or so. People are watching, but if something real bad happened, we'd really have nowhere to go.
Randy wants to stay, but knows with rising ocean waters, even their best defenses might not be enough.
I think that rock wall would be a temporary fix for the next few years, but later on down the line, like when our kids and their kids get older, I think this place will be, I don't know, it might be gone.
Shaktoolik has moved before. The people of the village moved to this location less than a lifetime ago.
The '64 flood was probably one of the ones that woke the village up.
And that distance added distance.
3 years' time that it took to move the village, more people become more dependent on themselves rather than dependent on the community.
The skeletal remnants of the old town site remain standing.
It was different, moving from there to here. And I could see that a lot of changes took place in that move when the town was kind of split and divided for a couple of years, 3 years. It was harder to get together as a community, it seemed like for Thanksgiving.
The people of Newtok are feeling that same strain. Children who once filled the school, gone.
Very weird. Kind of like you see them every day. Now, you expect them in the morning, you don't see their faces. And then, I don't know, we're gaining students. Now we're losing students, just like that.
With the possibility of losing a fifth of the students within weeks.
It is discouraging. Like, you see them every day, now you don't. My best friend is going to move soon. Now he's going to be across, and I'm going to be here probably another 2 more years, 2, 3 years average. After that, who knows?
But with the town losing up to 90 feet of coastline in 1 year, they know the time to move is now, if that time hasn't already passed. The impact on Alaska's coast, to both the people and the land, comes in many ways from the sea ice, or the fact the ice is now missing for much of the winter. The small Yupik village of Unalakleet sits on the shores of Norton Sound in western Alaska. About 700 people call this village home. It's also one of the last stops on the famed Iditarod sled dog race. Every March, teams race over frozen hills, rivers, and the ice on Norton Sound to reach the checkpoint. But recently, the ice has been thin and dangerous for mushers and their dog teams. John Wilson has lived in Unalakleet his whole life. He has seen the changes.
Every year since I've been in high school and younger and growing up, we had sea ice every year.
In a remote place like Unalakleet, where milk can cost more than $14 a gallon, people rely heavily on the land for their food. For those who hunt seals, a staple of the Western Alaskan diet, sea ice provides a platform for the hunt. In 2016, we joined John on a hunt.
There's 6 right here, 7 right here, close by. Whenever you can get out here, because it's not going to be here for very long once the wind starts changing and tide starts coming up.
That day, the ice was only 4 to 5 inches thick, and there were cracks that made it dangerous for the men to walk on.
Don't walk on the crack, Blake. I don't know how thick it is.
But in 3 years since that hunt, even that shallow ice remained absent.
Well, last year was the first year that I didn't kill a seal or an ogre last year, so that affected my family. Just by not having that food. And this year, again, it looks like it's going to be the same way again.
There are other ways to hunt this valuable resource.
The bearded seals, they're 700-800 pounds. I mean, we could probably get them in open water, but we ain't getting them in the boat unless you got 4 or 5 guys, and we don't normally hunt with 4 or 5 guys.
And there are other food sources. John says without the sea ice, they put down crab pots.
Got to roll with the punches.
But it's more than putting food on the table.
Well, passing the tradition down for hunting is very important to me and my family, because we want our kids to learn how to do what we were taught by our grandparents and parents.
In Utqiagvik, Alaska's northernmost community,
we're the people of the ice and snow.
Those same concerns are echoed.
There's no ice. There's hardly any snow.
A loss of culture, a change to their way of life.
Our culture is just going to disappear. If there's no ice, no whaling and everything, we can't even go out anymore. There's no celebration and, nothing at all.
Charles Hobson is 76 years old and the president of the Barrow Whaling Captains Association.
My whalers are having a hard time trying to get whale because there's no more ice here. The whales are sticking around in Canada where the ice is closer and the ocean is warm, and I don't know what we're going to do for the winter.
The sea ice stayed out of reach through November this year, a new record low for the Chukchi Sea.
Hunting was a big part of our lives and on the ice, and we had a lot of ice in the 80s, in the late 80s, and somewhere in the early 90s, we start seeing a big change, and ice was getting thinner and things were not safe. October 25, I was out 2 miles out in the ocean hunting. That was in 1996. Then after that, it progressed and progressed. And now today, in the last few years, it's been ice-free.
The ice helps calm the waves, making it safer for those who hunt on the ocean.
For a lot of us that are dependent on the sea for hunting on the ice, it's a waiting game now for us. And
it's a different kind of ice impacting the interior of Alaska. Ice buried deep in the soil. Dave Watts has lived in his home for 20 years.
You can get an idea here of how much settling has occurred. The building is literally sinking into the soil.
Beneath his home, permafrost, melting from the heat of the structures overhead.
There's no good option.
Walls cracked, foundation bowing.
And still owe money on? Yeah, it's something I try not to think about.
The floor's so warped, Dave says those first steps each morning can be a little disorienting.
Well, 20 years ago, engineers thought that the permafrost would reach an equilibrium and stop thawing. And now they don't believe that.
Only when all ice will melt, then surface will stabilize.
The fragile permafrost lingering under the topsoil in the interior of Alaska is from the last glacial period, which ended 12,000 years ago. 80% of that permafrost is made up of ice.
So imagine if this 80% of volume will turn into water, water will drain, surface will collapse.
Dr. Vladimir Romanovsky researches permafrost at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. He says the permafrost around Fairbanks is vulnerable, hovering close to the melting point.
Typically, you'll find permafrost here in the forest, this thick layer of organic layer like moss and then peat. So this layer protects permafrost from thawing.
But even that will not be enough to preserve the permafrost that remains.
So trying to protect permafrost, it's possible for a while, but eventually, if climate warming will continue the same way, it's probably will be impossible to save permafrost. So you may delay this process in time, but not forever.
A journey into the Earth's past is possible with just a few steps.
This is part of a steppe bison.
This permafrost research tunnel reaches back 40,000 years.
It's a shard of a mammoth tusk.
The excavation on this tunnel began in 1963, and even today, scientists and engineers come here to study frozen soils.
Basically, this is a good example of what happens when you don't refrigerate the permafrost. This is what would happen with the tunnel. This isn't a catastrophic collapse. This just happened slowly. It deformed over time.
The tunnel has a distinct scent.
The kids from the classes, when they come in here, this is like the first thing. They're all going, "Oh, it stinks in here."
That smell is a product of all the carbon stored in the permafrost.
Across the entire Arctic, all the way around the world, frozen in the permafrost is a whole lot of organic matter.
For thousands of years, Alaska was too cold for dead plants or animals to decay. All that organic matter left behind provides food for microbes, which in turn release methane and carbon dioxide.
Of course, the carbon dioxide and methane are actually greenhouse gases. And so as the permafrost degrades or thaws, and more species of microbes that work above freezing get into eating the carbon frozen in the permafrost, the more greenhouse gases that they emit.
Which means more warming. As the ground continues to thaw, more loss. Loss of a basic necessity, food.
These are our walk-in freezers.
For those who live with easy access to a grocery store,
In Inupiaq, it's called a sigluak.
an ice cellar might seem a little unusual.
It stays one stable temperature all year long.
Dug 12 feet down, it's a simple room carved out of the ground.
We don't package our food. We don't package it, we don't wrap it or anything. And the longer you leave it in there, stacked on the snow, fresh snow, we put fresh snow on the bottom. That's how we clean our fridge, change the snow.
And that connection to the soil and snow is important for the food Scott Huntsman provides for his family and community.
The earth actually adds a flavor to our food. It ages our food and makes it more tasty. And it flavors the earth, and the earth flavors it right back, and it adds a zest to it. And we like that. Aged muktuk, aged caribou and stuff, it tastes really good.
But a warming climate has taken back some of the bounty the earth provided.
Since the global warming has been hitting, it has filled back up with water that has melted the earth, and the water went back in there and it froze back up. there's still food in there. I just came to the reality that ours filled back up and there's our food in there. So it's preserved like forever.
Imagine one day all the food in your freezer vanished.
It was a shock when I first opened ours and it was frozen. It was a shock to us because we were going down in it to get dinner. One of the elders had told us to go down and get dinner, and we opened it up and it was frozen, so it was a shock.
The food Scott intended for his family and his community lost, trapped in the unforgiving ice.
Well, it's whaling season right now, so when they make strikes, we'll still get our muktuk, but we'll store it in man-made freezers, walk-in freezers.
But Scott will continue to provide.
If I have extra ducks, they'll go to the family. If I have extra caribou, it'll go to the family until they get on their feet. And that's how we do. We share with everybody. Shares. That's one thing we don't do is argue about food. That's one of the least arguments that we've ever had in our table. We share with everybody.
About 5 minutes out of Utqiagvik sits the Kathy Parker Field, home to the Barrow Whalers football team. Distinctive with its blue turf, a gift from its namesake, a football mom from Jacksonville, Florida, who was fascinated by the challenges of football in the Arctic.
Preseason workouts, we were about to go to the field, and I believe we had to cancel practice because there was a polar bear warning, and that there was a polar bear roaming around our field, and so I believe we had to cancel, and I had to stay in the gym.
Here, the team practices in all kinds of weather.
I haven't seen a cutoff temperature.
The iconic blue field makes the football program possible.
It's important to have kids to do extracurricular activities. And so if they're not doing extracurricular activities, they have a lot of idle time. And we're trying to build these young men to be better, not only on the field, but outside the field also.
After 12 years, the rippled horizon shows signs of damage to the turf.
This field is laid straight on the tundra and stuff, so we have to deal with the erosion in some spots. We got some low spots here that we got to try to fill in and stuff.
They intend to make some repairs with the hope they can keep playing on a field that means so much.
I don't know how much longer we'll be able to play on it, so we hope to get another 5 to 10 years out of it if we can, but I doubt it.
Already the road that leads to the field and beyond to prime fishing and hunting grounds is washing away.
As far as the town and the road, where we're standing was well away from the ocean. There was an entire one-lane road and a berm and a beach.
High sand berms are built and rebuilt to keep the ocean away from the road.
They put up more of a seawall and sandbags and all sorts of other stuff, and it just kept getting destroyed and then fix it and getting destroyed and fix it. And then in 2017 we just had a huge storm and it just completely trashed the road, and at that point I think they gave up and they're trying to come up with some kind of a better solution.
With no clear answers in sight, many are looking to the future.
It's like we're crying up here. We should not have to cry, you guys.
Alaska's youth have joined the international chorus, advocating for their generation, calling for a change.
I am not an environmentalist. I'm an Indigenous youth. I am Indigenous, and we are not here to fight with our own people. We are here to stand together. This is a serious issue. I'm worried about our future generations.
People facing the daily impacts of a changing climate say they'll adapt. There's no other choice.
Adapt and overcome. You know, I mean, there's nothing else you can do is just to keep going. You gotta, change is coming, change is coming.
We have to find our way to get the food that needs to be on the table. We do manage and change and hunt and prepare ourselves for some of the things that, you know, we are not used to.
That's just the way it is. You have to adapt to survive. And if we could do it for millions of years, I'm pretty sure we could keep doing it.
Humans will undoubtedly learn to adapt to this new world. But at what loss?
No words could ever express the heartfelt sorrow that I personally feel because all the spots where I used to geese hunt are out there in the middle of the river, and they're locked away in my memories forever. I can't even share those memories with my son. There are no words to ever express how I feel.
With its nickname of the Last Frontier, it's easy to imagine the Alaska of yesterday, rustic and isolated. Today, the people of Alaska stand on the forefront of a climate changed.